Good morning, Bishop Malcolm.
Morning, Chris.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Good. Today we're going to be thinking about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So our first question is, why did Christ need to die and be resurrected? Could he have carried out his mission without dying?
I think everything's possible for God, and there probably could have been other ways in which God was able to redeem us. But what he did was really quite dramatic, in the sense that it was this identification of the Creator with his creatures, which actually opened the way for us to an eternity with God. So having separated ourselves from God in the past, we were now reunited with him. Suffering and dying enters into the worst of the human condition, the deepest suffering and humanity that we endure. And that was necessary for Jesus to show that he was like us and could lead us through this suffering and death to an eternity with God. So in that sense it was necessary, but of course at the same time we can also say that God could have done it another way, but that's beyond our imagining.
The next question is, do we know for certain that Jesus rose from the dead?
There's plenty of evidence to say that he did. It depends what you mean by certain, of course. I think it's true to say that Jesus rose from the dead. There's evidence in the scriptures. The empty tomb is the first evidence that we have. It's documented in all the Gospels, and it is an interesting way of showing that Jesus was raised from the dead. There was no question of him kind of popping out of the tomb in front of lots of witnesses. If that was the case, I wonder who would have believed him. It would have been more like a conjuring trick. But the evidence which is there, witnessed to by women, which is not the best way in ancient times to prove a fact, because women didn't have status in the Roman courts of law. So that's an interesting angle on it too. But then there's the evidence of the early disciples. St. Paul states clearly that Jesus appeared to Peter and to the apostles, and then eventually to him. So yes, I think it is certain that he was raised from the dead.
So where was Jesus between his death and his resurrection?
Well, that's one of the great mysteries, isn't it? The traditional understanding of what happened, if you like, between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, in other words on Holy Saturday, is that he descended into hell, hell being the place where those souls that were separated from God actually existed. That's a very deep and mystical way of understanding that total entry into the human condition that Jesus took upon himself. So he was able to lead people out of that condition, that state of being. And the tradition of the church tells us that good people who lived before Christ were all there, people like Noah and Moses and Abraham and so on, and they were all led into the light of Easter by Jesus at that time. Did God die on the cross? Well, insofar as Jesus is God, yes, he did die on the cross. But it wouldn't have, if Jesus hadn't have died totally, then the point in entering into our suffering and pain and our death would have made no sense at all. It would have just been a sham. But when we look at the understanding of God dying that Jesus being in God as as the Son of the Father and united totally with him in the Holy Spirit, that full realization of Jesus as a member of the Blessed Trinity didn't actually come about until the church reflected on this over the following few centuries. So you can say that things like God died on the cross, but then it's better, I think, to think in terms of Jesus' relationship with his Father. I think that's a more meaningful way into us entering into the passion and death of Jesus, so that we too may be raised again.
So what is meant by the resurrection of the body?
Well, St. Paul's quite good on this, and he says that our bodies will not be the same as our earthly bodies, that they will be spiritual bodies, is the way he puts it. I think what he's saying is that they will be different, because obviously our bodies rot or get cremated. They will be different, but they'll be recognisable as the same thing. The later philosophers, the medieval theologians and philosophers, said it was necessary for us to have our bodies. We're not a complete person without our bodies. It's as though, there will be a point in time where we will collect our bodies from a kind of celestial cloakroom, and get and become whole again. But I don't think we need to think like that. I think we need to think nowadays in terms of wholeness, in becoming fully ourselves when we are in the light of the Almighty as we experience the beatific vision.
So what do you imagine heaven to be like?
I don't know, I remember somebody saying it was like getting the last clue on the Times crossword. It's that moment of joy and knowing, where you can see with your mind without necessarily being very logical about it, but it just slots into place. It's that instant of understanding and joy and love, which comes to us through the gift of God. So it will be something like that, I think, but who knows? I know the priest will get plenty to eat in heaven. It says that in the Psalms somewhere. So that's always worth remembering. It's a good reason for becoming a priest.
Well, thank you very much, Jim.